Welcome, welcome. It is September 16th, 2016, and you are listening to Counterculture with Aaron Lujan. This is the place on the internet where you can get the most important headlines of the day, unfiltered, unspun, unomitted, the news that matters to you most. And I derive my sources from all over the web, from independent blogs, international news sources, mainstream media, independent media, whatever is the most important, whatever matters to us, free people the most, people who just want to survive and be left alone and raise our families in peace. This is where you'll find it, the counterculture. And the reason it's called counterculture is because the culture is moving in a direction towards deception, in a direction that is aligning your thinking for their agenda to be fulfilled. So let's go ahead and get this started. This is episode 6 of Counterculture. The first article of the day opening us up. How appropriate. The newamerican.com. Americans' trust in media takes sharp dip. Gallup, the leading polling firm in the country, has been asking since 1972, asking Americans where they are in terms of trust and confidence in the American media. Back in 1976, immediately after Vietnam and Watergate, 72% of Americans said that they expressed trust and confidence in newspaper and television news media. Today, 2016, it was just reported this week, 32% have trust and confidence, which is more interesting than the comparison of 76 is in the comparison of 2015 last year, down sharply 8%. And the question was to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. Sharply down 8%, and a lot of folks think it's because of the election. I would have to agree. Also interesting is 14% of them are Republican. So the Republicans are the ones that are really distrustful and making it the lowest in 20 years. WorldNet Daily, WND.com, is reporting Ford just latest in long line of offshore deals. Ford Motor Company says it plans to move its entire small car operation to Mexico over the next 2 years. As you may know, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was set up to encourage large corporations like Ford to move their operations into places with less regulation, less taxes, and lower wages. Well, if you're in business, why wouldn't you? Quote, Ford said in April it would spend $1.6 billion to build a new plant in Mexico and will build small cars in that plant, and said last year it would end production of the Ford Focus and Ford C-Max in Wayne, Michigan in 2018. The Daily Mail out of the UK, speaking of Mexico, Mexico now wants to build a border wall. They want the wall, but on their southern border. They want to keep the hordes of illegal immigrants from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala out of their country. Mexican newspaper El Mañana published an article, yes to the border wall, but in Mexico's south. They believe that, quote, Trump's idea of a border wall is a good one, but it should be on the southern border with Central America, El Mañana board wrote. So they're not happy with the immigrants coming into their country. I will quote another part of the article. Many of these migrants, when they are unable to find an honest way of life, turn to robberies, kidnappings, extortions, and in the worst cases, join the ranks of organized crime. Well, if Mexico had a liberal media, which they very well may do, but in a different context, but if they had our flavor of the media, I don't even know why I call them liberal, but that's what everyone out there calls it. I would call it something different. If they had something like we did, they would probably be calling El Mañana and the Mexican people racist towards Hondurans and El Salvadorians, and that they should retract their statements because Hondurans, El Salvadorans, and Guatemalans aren't robbers, aren't kidnappers, and are not extorters. We're not going to hear that, though, but that's what's being reported in Mexico. And the United States has sent Mexico $75 million for equipment and training to help them keep the immigrants out. Now, on the topic of immigration, going back to WorldNet Daily, we have an article titled Obama's 110,000 refugees, only half the story. The Obama administration told Congress that it wants to permanently resettle 110,000 refugees in fiscal 2017, which will begin on October 1st, roughly half of them coming from jihadist hotspots like Syria, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Burma, where it's extremely difficult to vet. And as we all know, over the last, 15 years, the infrastructure has been destroyed. The young men don't have any work, and then they're being told to come over to listen to the imam tell them how it's all the West's fault and they need to wage jihad. And the only evidence that they have is the fact that their countries have been ravaged, and memories of American soldiers coming in and government American contractors coming in and taking their country down and occupying it and conquering it. So I don't blame those young, uneducated men without opportunity to go to the imam and get radicalized, especially if they're at an impressionable age, similar to our young men on the inner city streets joining gangs. It's the same concept, fatherlessness and a lack of opportunity, the two things that built America. But I digress. So what we have now is an increase of up to 29% from 2016 levels of 85,000 refugees, and up 57% from 2015 when we had 70,000 refugees. And experts are saying that it will probably get close to 200,000 refugees in America from countries that have terrorists, and they're not getting vetted by Congress. So President Obama, thank you very much, but I think we should all get in line and be sympathetic to the poor refugees like Germany and open them up with open arms. Moving along, I would encourage you to go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Aaron Lujan, and watch a report that I filed 2 weeks ago. It's African migrants entering the United States through Mexico. I, after posting that report, saw another report where a gentleman in Baja, he lives in Tijuana, actually saw Muslims in the line of African migrants trying to come into the country, which is very interesting considering that there has also been radical Islamic terror cells in the Congo and in Central Africa. Moving along, actually, I don't want to move along. I forgot a part. The reason experts agree that 200,000 will be the level of refugees coming into the country is because the Obama administration has consulted with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, on ways to bring more refugees from Syria into the U.S. through alternative pathways like visas, health visas, the expansion of the families, and reunification visa and other creative methods. Very interesting. My wife said to stop using the word interesting because I use it too much. I can't help myself. I'm so sorry. Speaking of immigration, WorldNet Daily is also reporting DHS hides damning border study that would help elect Trump. Federal lawmakers ordered a report from the Department of Homeland Security assessing the situation, but President Obama's DHS refuses to release the report because sources say the administration fears it would look bad and help elect Donald Trump. So essentially the report was released in November, and the report actually shows that the number of illegal immigrants getting across successfully are a lot higher than what we are being told. DHS officials are saying that it's about 80%. The report that's allegedly getting suppressed is stating that or revealing that percentage is a lot lower. And sources told Fox it was finished in November and reveals that about half of the illegal adults who try to cross the border are successful. So 50% as opposed to 80%, 250,000 in total. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, told Fox News that the Obama administration knows that the number of illegal aliens successfully getting across the Mexican border is 158% higher than they are telling people. Pinocchio. Quote, the administration has made fraudulent changes in the numbers to hide this. So we have lying, we have fraud in the Department of Homeland Security. It's called fraud because if you're an official at an official capacity advising Congress on national security and you are deliberately giving incorrect or false information, I would put that in the definition of fraud. The New York Times.com, Gerald Celente calls the toilet paper on record. Hillary Clinton takes aim at voters drifting toward third party. So the Hillary Clinton campaign is in, of course, the battleground states, but the specific strategy that the New York Times is reporting is that they're trying to dissuade millennials, people like myself that were born in 81 and after. I think it's 81 to 94. If you're a millennial, God help us. Don't vote for Gary Johnson. Do not vote for Jill Stein. The principal super PAC of Hillary Clinton's campaign. I'm going to complain about my campaign. Priorities USA Action concluded from polling and research that those who hate Trump, especially the millennials of the liberal Bernie Sanders flavor, really, really hate Trump. But unfortunately for Lord Hillary, they won't vote for her. And I know this from firsthand. I'm on Facebook on a daily basis. I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. I have dozens and probably more of friends that are Bernie Sanders supporters who will not bow before the altar of Hillary Clinton and are still posting hashtag still Sanders, etc. So I know this issue is very real. The Hillary Clinton campaign knows it's very real. And they know it's so real that they've enlisted Al Gore, the inventor of the internet, I'm joking, to convince voters that a third-party vote is a vote for Trump. So now what we're going to start hearing in Colorado, Ohio, Florida, and all these other battleground states is that if you vote for a third party, if you're voting for Jill Stein, if you're voting for Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson, you are voting, that is essentially a vote for Trump. Very interesting. Well, let's see how successful Al Gore is in convincing millennials, the 40, 50-year-old man. See how good of a job he does. Infowars.com is reporting ex-U.S. diplomat warns Hillary will start nuclear war with Russia and China. That sounds crazy. It sounds sensational, but we have to give credence to a foreign policy advisor to the Senate of 18 years, the gentleman Jatras, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, James Jatras, told Sputnik Radio, quote, let's find the quote, look at the people surrounding her. Mike Morell, acting former director of the CIA who wants to assassinate Russians in Syria. You have Michelle Florini, former Defense Department official, wants to start bombing in Syria as soon as Hillary takes office when she becomes Secretary of Defense. He said that Hillary is the candidate of endless war and is going to potentially start, quote, regional wars, including a potential nuclear confrontation with Russia and China. So, folks, we have people in foreign policy, formerly in the Department of Defense, advisors to the Senate saying, if you vote for this woman, she will start nuclear war. But instead, if you follow Occupy Democrats on Facebook, you'll hear that Trump is going to start nuclear war because he makes offhanded comments. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not voting for Trump. What I'm voting for is for fairness in media, and I'm part of that percentage of people that Gallup polled that have absolutely zero trust in the media for this very reason. Moving along, excuse me, man. Every time I eat cereal, I got this weird reflex. I probably should have talked about it, but since we're on the topic of realness and keeping it real, and since we opened up the broadcast with Tupac, Troublesome. Speaking of keeping it real, I just got to keep it real today on Counterculture. RasmussenReports.com, which Democrat should replace Hillary? The Rasmussen poll, 48% of Americans polled suggest that Bernie Sanders should be the nominee if Hillary Clinton's health precludes her from the nomination or from going into general election. I act to agree. I disagree personally with Bernie Sanders' politics, but I agree with fairness and I agree with justice. And Bernie Sanders, in my analysis, won the primary, the Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders should be the nominee. Bernie Sanders represents the will of the people. I'm not part of that group. I'm not part of Trump's group, but I'm part of the American groupthink that we should all, and groupthink not in a negative term, but in groupthink in the definition that we should all agree and think that whoever wins the election fairly should be the nominee. That every vote counted. If it ends up being for Bernie Sanders, then Bernie Sanders should be the nominee. Freep.com, Freep, that sounds weird. New poll shows Clinton and Trump nearly tied in Michigan. How many of you guys are so tired of this election? I mean, I was going through the news this morning. I'm like, I'm so sick and tired of talking about freaking Hillary Clinton. Oh my God, why do I live in this world? I was in high school, man. Bill Clinton was the president. I was hearing about this woman. I'm 35, man. I got kids. I'm talking about this woman. It's Free Press, WXYZ-TV poll reveals Trump ties Hillary in a state that hasn't backed Republicans since 1988. So the tide is turning in the election. Trump is gaining in states that are Democratic strongholds. We are in trouble if we are in the Hillary campaign, but we're in trouble if we are the American people, because God forbid a Trump presidency. Oh my gosh, that's like Bush on steroids, man. And Bush was bad news. Moving on to good news. Finally, I was able to find some really good news, guys. Listen to this. This is from the UK. Express.co.uk is reporting faster than speed of sound. NASA's radical future plan for plane travel. Strap your seatbelt tight and hold on. NASA has revealed plans for passenger planes faster than the speed of sound. So I hope NASA pops up in my kayak or my Expedia or my Orbits next time so I can go to space next time I want to get out of town. Actually, this sounds really good right about now, probably to all of us at this election. I think if this was available now, we would all be booking our tickets. NASA has revealed plans for passenger planes that will fly faster than the speed of sound. The project, which is a coordination with Aurora Flight Sciences, a U.S.-based, Virginia-based firm, along with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was granted 2.19 million pounds. I don't know what that equates into U.S. dollars, but it's a lot, probably more, to bring what's called the double bubble plane to commercial availability. Could launch in 2027. So what is that? In 11 years? 180 people could fly at 582 miles per hour. See what happens when we have innovation, American innovators like the folks over at Aurora Flight Sciences. I love free market capitalism. It's really awesome. Flying to space. Very cool. Speaking of space, the Washington Post is reporting that Jeff Bezos on nuclear reactors in space, the lack of bacon on Mars, and humanity's destiny in the solar system is the title of the article. The article is about Jeff Bezos, the owner and founder of Amazon, recently launched a company called Blue Origin, and he has a vision for his company Blue Origin to have millions working and living in space. They've launched and landed the same rocket 4 times in a row. And he foresees in 2018 that tourists will be able to take short trips to the outer or closer to the outer atmosphere of the Earth with big windows so they can take a view of our crazy world that Hillary Clinton wants to blow. I'm so, man, how did I tie that in? It's good news. I'm sorry, guys. MarketWatch.com, back to Earth. MarketWatch.com, hello self-driving cars, goodbye 4.1 million jobs. So essentially it's government reports and futurists and analysts that are saying that all of this automation, especially with cars, is going to get rid of a lot of jobs. Think Uber, think cabs, think truck drivers, think all of that. That's an industry essentially with 4.1 million jobs. Think maybe FedEx, UPS. I mean, why would FedEx pay a guy benefits and unemployment and insurance when he can have an automated truck drive around? Very interesting. Sorry, I said it again. I'm just going to say interesting for the rest of my life. World Net Daily. Everybody should be interested in this. How many of y'all's pay income tax? I hate the IRS. I got to get in touch with them this month. I just reminded myself I got to pay them on a payment plan. House conservatives are making the case for the impeachment of IRS Commissioner John Koskinen, blasting Republican leaders for failing to hold the Obama administration official accountable for anything and even being afraid of the administration. So if we all remember, I think it was last year, we had the former IRS Commissioner Lois Lerner get caught in congressional testimony targeting conservatives, destroying emails, just committing all kinds of crimes. She was removed from her position, and the Obama administration put this John Koskinen into power, who's now heading the IRS. And House Republicans are saying that this guy has not made anything better. He's made it worse. As soon as he's come into office, he's deleted thousands of emails. He's perjured himself, and he's already lied to Congress. Nothing has changed. And so House Republicans are having a hard time finding allies, and the leaders of this movement, let's give them some shots out. Republican from Louisiana, John Fleming, and Republican from Kansas, Tim Huelskamp, have introduced a privilege resolution. A resolution requires a resolution that requires a floor vote and is not subject to the scheduling priorities of House leaders. Anyways, they've come forward and said, "Hey, Republicans, allies, why are you scared, man? Why are you scared? Are you scared of Obama? Are you scared? Let's impeach this guy. There's crimes that are happening," which is very telling to me and kind of sends chills up my back that we're now in a situation where the quote opposition party, and I'm not a Republican, I'm just as critical of Republicans as Democrats. I see them as one party. But it sends chills up my back that this Republican Party is actually afraid. And I have to agree with these Republicans, because look at all the crime that's been committed and no one's been held accountable. Can you imagine if Republicans were doing this, what the Democrats would do? You got to give it to the Democrats, man. They're not afraid, but they're not afraid for a reason. I'll let you wonder the reason for that. Moving along, Infowars.com, for all you potheads and drankers. Battle of the Buzz. Alcohol industry bankrolls fight against legal pot in Battle of the Balls. Sorry. Battle of the Buzz. Beer distributor PAC, which is another political action committee. They basically represent 16 beer distribution companies in Massachusetts, gave $25,000 to the Campaign for a Safe and Healthy Massachusetts. Who is the Campaign for a Safe and Healthy Massachusetts? It's the largest camp group that is opposed or trying to block the legalization of marijuana in the state of Massachusetts. So tying it for third place amongst the largest contributors to the anti-pot organization, we now see that the beer industry is very concerned that people may want to get high instead of getting drunk. I got Patron in my cup. And if you guys all remember, Arizona last week also had a similar situation. A company called Insys, INSYS, who is a synthetic cannabis producer, has also donated money to a lobby group that is also opposed to the legalization of marijuana. I will let you decide for yourself. I personally think that both substances should be legal because we're all adults and we can all make decisions for ourselves. And I think the will of the people should be heard and let these guys battle it out. But let's at least have a free election where we can all know the dangers of alcohol and the dangers of marijuana. One thing that I don't think is being disclosed on both sides. Moving along, the Huffington Post, Missouri lawmakers, you don't need a permit or training or even a background check to carry a concealed weapon. Great news for Second Amendment proponents. Very bad news for the anti-gunners. Missouri lawmakers pushed through bills on Wednesday eliminating the need for permits to carry concealed weapons and requiring voters to show a photo identification before casting a ballot overriding Democratic Governor Jay Nixon's vetoes of the bills. I like this in one aspect, not for the obvious reason, but I like it for the reason that you have a state legislature that's using their 2/3 power to tell the governor, you're not a dictator. I realize that you want people in Missouri to not be able to have to carry a permit to carry concealed, and I realize that you want no IDs being required to vote, but we the people actually disagree with you, Governor Nixon. We are going to allow the people of Missouri to carry weapons, and they don't need a single piece of paper. They don't need to do anything. It's their right. They can go buy a gun, and they can do whatever they want with it. NBCnews.com. Now, I'm going to predict right here on Counterculture that this news story that I'm about to share with you, and this young man's name will be the thing that you're going to hear about all next week, and you're going to especially hear about it from NFL players. And so strap on your seatbelt, guys. If you haven't heard about it, you've heard it here first. NBCnews.com is reporting last night, Tyre King, age 13, fatally shot by police in Columbus, Ohio. Guess what color skin he has? Black. Black kid. 13-year-old boy. Now, here's what happened. Before we get into the politics, let's just go into the facts. Let's look at the 911 calls briefly. Police were called when a boy pulled a gun on someone demanding money. The victim said the gun looked like a 1911 style Ruger. The cops went to the scene, found the young boy, they attempted to speak to them. Apparently there was more than just himself. So the young 13-year-old, 13-year-old Tyre King runs away. The cops chase him, attempted to take them into custody. 13-year-old Tyre King pulls a gun from his waistband. Cops shoot 13-year-old Tyre King. Now here's the ringer. The gun was a BB gun. So I think what we're going to hear next week is white racist cops shoot 13-year-old black kid and all he had was a BB gun. I want the whole NFL to sit down, lay down when they're giving the Pledge of Allegiance. I want Cleveland on fire. I want where did this take place? No, it wasn't in Cleveland. It was in Columbus, Ohio. I want Columbus on fire. I want riots in LA. Where's Black Lives Matter? I want them on the streets. I want Jesse Jackson and Reverend Al Sharpton, man. We gotta just start destroying private property. We need to start breaking windows. I don't want to hear the emergency 911 calls. All I need to know is that a 13-year-old black kid got shot and all he had was a BB gun. Because you know what? That's all that people are going to listen to. And that's all they're going to hear. I'm a little excited this morning, man. I'm not sorry. LATimes.com. Speaking of law enforcement, man versus machine. LA sheriff's deputies use robot to snatch rifle from barricaded suspect and end standoffs. The largest sheriff's department in America, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, who, by the way, every interaction I ever had with them, dude. Those guys were cool. I got a free ride from them one time. And I wasn't going to jail. I know that sounded kind of funny. But no, they did it because I was actually, I was in need of a ride because my car got towed for too many tickets, and these guys were really cool. And anyways, thought it was interesting to note because of all the anti-cop sentiment. I've dealt with bad cops, Albuquerque Police Department. I've dealt with good cops. LA sheriffs are G's. But this story is especially interesting because sheriffs use the robot to disarm a suspect, and we're just going to start seeing more and more of this. I remember growing up as a kid, RoboCop, how that seemed so sci-fi and so out of this world. And here I am at 35, 2016, and we're literally having police robots disarm suspects. They just don't look like RoboCop yet, but be patient. We're getting there. Speaking of marijuana, WorldNet Daily is reporting something bad news for weed heads. New marijuana breathalyzer detects smoke in edibles. We have a company out of Oakland, Hounds Labs Incorporated, announced it was field testing a device called the Hound that can detect THC. I'm going to try to pronounce THC. Tetrahydrocannabinol. Man, I thought I almost had it. The active ingredient in marijuana after consumption of both smoked and edible pot products. So Colorado, Massachusetts, California, Nevada, Florida, be on the lookout because now you're not going to be able to drive high no more. Now the other article moving on is Infowars.com. This title is The Organic Industry Wants to Label Humanely Raised Meat. Now, this article is very interesting because you have the Organic Trade Association petitioning the United States, the USDA, to approve a proposal to be able to label meat, beef, as organic. Farmers must give their chickens a certain amount of space, and hogs must be housed together and not in individual stalls. Animals should also be allowed outside on most days, weather permitting. So I think good news for, I got good news. Good news for the food industry. Good news, maybe bad news for farmers perhaps, but again, I don't know. Maybe I need to learn more about farmers. Farmers email me, but I'm hearing that they're being put in difficult positions because of all these new food regulations, but I think it's a win for people like myself who don't want to be giving my daughters and my wife unnecessary hormones that I've read have wreaked havoc, especially on women, and they come primarily from meat. I like the idea that we're now going to be able to label and have transparency with the shoppers as far as what's inside the meat that they're purchasing. Staying on Infowars.com, TV ad encourages German women to wear hijabs. Hijabs are those cloths that certain Muslim women wear over their hair and their face, partially, to cover themselves as dictated in the Quran. Germany gives up on migrant assimilation but chooses submission would have been my title. The television ad has a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German woman wearing a hijab saying, "Enjoy difference, start tolerance." Did she say enjoy difference? Yeah, enjoy difference, start tolerance. So here's the deal. We got millions, I don't know millions, but hundreds of thousands of refugees, most of them Muslims in Germany and Europe right now. And unlike historically they would assimilate to the culture has to assimilate to the refugee. Unprecedented. But if you study Islam and you understand it and you understand the dictates of Islam, they are conquerors. They are not assimilators. This doesn't mean every Muslim on the street's a bad guy. I have Muslim friends. I have Muslim clients. What I'm saying is that many of my friends and clients don't actually follow the Quran, just like many of my Christian friends don't follow the Bible. Actually, that's more true of the latter. So I'll be more critical of Christians any day of the week, not for political correctness, but just in truth. But my point on this hijab situation is that we're seeing nations capitulate to Islam. And I want to say, try to pull that here. Try to pull that in Texas. Having our cowgirls wearing hijabs, man, that ain't going to happen. BeforeIt'sNews.com is reporting tonight. We're going to see more wonders in the sky as the Bible prophesied in the last times. We're going to see a full moon. I don't know if you guys saw the moon yesterday, man. It was big, it was low, it was beautiful. Tonight, there's going to be another rare lunar eclipse. A lot of religious implications behind it, which I will not get into. And what I mean by religious, I'm talking about pagan groups and have a lot to say about this. The Bible actually has something to say about it. But essentially, we're going to see something like smoke coming from the top of the moon in a partial eclipse, and it's going to be a wondrous sight. So if you have your chance tonight, take a look up at the moon. Bloomberg.com, shifting over to economic news because we all care about what's in the checking account. Bloomberg.com is reporting that Deutsche Bank AG is being asked to pay $14 billion in a probe by the United States Justice Department tied to residential mortgage-backed security fraud. $14 billion. This isn't the slap on the wrist that Wells Fargo got of $110 million for committing fraud beyond the scope of imagination, which I talked about in episode 3 or 4. I can't remember. This one is a real punishment. 14 bill. So bad that their shares and its riskiest bonds dropped the most since the Brexit occurred. And Deutsche has said that they will not settle. And it's interesting that this happened now because it was a few weeks after the EU hit Apple with the $14 billion fine for back taxes. Retribution maybe in the financial gangs. I don't know. But the next article is unrelated but exactly related to it. It's out of zerohedge.com. Former Treasury Secretary warns banks riskier now than in the 2008 crisis. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers published a new paper, and I'll quote, "To our surprise, we find that the financial market information provides little support for the view that major institutions are significantly safer than they were before the crisis, and some support for the notion that risks have actually increased." So we have the U.S. Treasury Secretary, former, saying that the banks are riskier now than they were during the crisis. And if anybody understands basic economics, if these banks collapse, what do you think is going to happen to your job? What do you think is going to happen to your savings account, your checkings account, your 401k? How often do you check your checking account? How important is money in your life? It's a part of all of our lives. We should be paying attention. That's why you're listening to Counterculture, trying to bring this information to you guys so that we know what's going on. Or else you're going to only think that the only thing that's going on, and I'm going to get ahead of myself, is whatever, I don't even know anymore. Whatever's trending on Facebook. I think I saw, I don't even know, man. Anyways, I just lost my place. Hold on. New media. Unpolished. Okay, so that was the report from the U.S. Treasury Secretary that the banks are in big trouble. Yahoo.com news is reporting Obama gathers advisors amid unease over Syria deal. So if you all remember, just a couple days ago, the U.S. State Department and the Russians came to a ceasefire agreement in Syria that was quickly violated. Essentially, what was supposed to happen was to allow some humanitarian aid. There's some 250,000 people in Syria that have been besieged that need basic supplies, food, water, medicine, etc., because a lot of their hospitals have been blown up. Only God knows what's going on with these poor people in Syria. And apparently they can't reach them. And there is a lot of confusion as to where we move forward with this ceasefire. And the confusion is is evident in the fact that Obama is gathering his advisors and trying to come up kind of with a plan B. We have starving, injured people that can't get assistance. We have a violation of the ceasefire and all the implications that surround that whole entire crisis. But don't worry, this is what I was looking for earlier. Bill Murray, the comedian, is working at a bar in Brooklyn this weekend. So if you want a Cosmo or a IPA or you want to do some shots with the boys, go down to a bar in Brooklyn this weekend. Bill Murray will be glad to serve you. It'll be like Cheers, but with Bill Murray there. Oh, and Jimmy Fallon Trump let Jimmy Fallon mess up his hair. Now, this war in Syria has already claimed 300,000 lives. But don't worry about that. Trump got his hair messed up on Jimmy Fallon's show. I think I'm getting sick to my stomach. Moving along, thenewamerican.com reports that the United States has been funding the Taliban in Afghanistan. Now, see, I'm 35 and I'm old enough to remember the old days way back in, that was way back in 2001. Way back in 2001, we had this event, 9/11, and we went into Afghanistan, and it was like immediate, and Bush was going in with all hell and was going to eliminate the Taliban because they were the enemy. If we all remember, the Taliban was the enemy. And here we are a short 15 years later, or I should say a very long 15 years later, depending on which perspective you're on. We've been giving the Taliban money. A new report by the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction indicates that in some cases, U.S. aid went directly into the hands of those fighting the American-backed government. Billions of dollars in American aid were utilized in contracts and partnerships which malign power brokers. Corrupt warlords demanded protection payments from U.S. defense contractors if they wanted access to public roads, which provided a nice, hefty income for the Taliban. Quote, stemming from a growing body of evidence that corrupt networks were channeling support to the Taliban, a consensus began to emerge among Department of Defense, state, and U.S. aid that corruption was undermining core U.S. goals by materially fueling the insurgency and turning the population against the Afghan government, said the report. Quote, in short, corruption posed a strategic threat to the mission. Moving along, WorldNet Daily is reporting Fed report amends laws so gay rights trump faith. This is my last article and my most concerning article. Not because the most harm necessarily is going to take place, although you could argue that it could. And what I mean by harm is harm, I don't mean like a bunch of people are going to die. I don't mean, there's going to be all this disaster. But harm in that the core, the heart of our country. And I realize that I'm speaking to a lot of people who don't have a very clear idea, and it's not your fault because I'm in that same camp. I was someone who grew up that didn't have a clear idea of what my country is, where it came from. But see, I took some time, and I don't fully even understand entirely the spirit in which America was born out of revolution and how America started and what made America so great. But the little bit that I do understand and what I believe to understand about America is the First Amendment. And I think most people would agree with this, that and the founders made it number one. That's why it was the First Amendment. The freedom of speech and the freedom to worship freely however you so choose. And if we all remember second grade social studies, when we had to dress up like pilgrims and Indians and go to school, one of the things we remember is that the pilgrims were there. The pilgrims came to America. Well, what were pilgrims? Pilgrims were Christians who were being persecuted in Europe and fled because they wanted to worship God, so how they chose. And they had a Thanksgiving dinner with the Indians. So that's the spirit of America, is this idea that we should have this natural God-given right to worship, or if you're atheist, not to worship. Because and that's what's so beautiful about America, is that you can be Muslim, you can be atheist, and you don't have to worship if you don't want to, unlike if you live in a Muslim country where if you don't become a Muslim and convert, they'll kill you. What's and this is the story that I'm going. So the news is pretty much over. If you guys want to switch out and not hear my rants, you guys can cut the broadcast now. But I've been promising you all week that I'm going to focus in on one issue, and this is it today. And it's from WorldNet Daily, and it's this article by Bob Unruh, and it's about something that's happening right now in the Obama administration that I'll get into in a bit. But let me begin with this rant that America was founded on this idea of people being able to worship or not to worship, and that government and the force of government couldn't be used against them. Free country. Everyone loves to quote free country. Well, this is the original freedom. The original freedom were the pilgrims coming to America, fleeing religious persecution, and worshiping so how their conscience led them or not lead them. And so the article covers a new report from the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And this group is advising the president and advising his administration on how to handle the First Amendment, as they say, with regards to transgendered, homosexual, quote unquote, rights. And essentially what we have is this report titled Peaceful Coexistence, Reconciling Non-Discrimination Principles with Civil Liberties. What the report illustrates or is arguing is that people of religious faith are infringing upon the rights of those with different gender identity and those with different sexual orientation. It says the fault lies with the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. And I'm going to quote this report. It, quote, constricts the ability of government actors to curtail private citizens' rights to the protections of non-discrimination laws and policies. Now that sounds like a mouthful, but when I read that, what I interpret is that the government this commission is arguing to the Obama administration that people who worship or believe or have a faith that can be interpreted as, quote, infringing on the rights of those who have different gender identities, if that's such a thing, or sexual orientations, should be curtailed. That's not allowed. That's actually not a protection in the First Amendment. So my interpretation of this report is they want to redefine the First Amendment. On the very first page of these 306 pages, and let me quote it, religious exemptions to the protections of civil rights based upon classifications such as race, color, national origin, sex, disability status, sexual orientation, and gender identity, when they are permissible, significantly infringe upon these civil rights. Religious exemptions infringe upon these civil rights. So your ability to freely worship however you so choose is an infringement upon so-called gender identity and sexual orientation. Close quote. Overly broad religious exemptions unduly burden non-discrimination laws and policies. Amazing, amazing, amazing times that we live in. The country of the pilgrims, one nation under God. Well, this didn't go well with Liberty Counsel. If anybody's familiar with Liberty Counsel, they're one of the leading groups for religious freedom in America. Their founder and chairman, Matt Staver, released a statement, called it a shocking example of the war against religious freedom in America. And he also said, the report is a declaration of war against religious freedom. George Washington said anyone who works against the twin pillars of religion and morality cannot be called a patriot. This report is un-American. So we're essentially seeing the trashing of the First Amendment, the trashing of religious freedom, whenever faith and practice collides with an intolerant LGBT agenda. This LGBT agenda is crazy town, guys. First Amendment overthrown. Religious freedom overthrown. When will we stop? These poor protected class of people, are they really discriminated against? Who are the discriminated people now? Who's getting discriminated against? If I'm not allowed to go to church and read from Romans because it says homosexuality is an abomination, then my church and my ability to go to church would be stopped because I would be conflicting or infringing upon the quote unquote rights of homosexuals. Well, my belief about that lifestyle isn't stopping a homosexual person from continuing with their lifestyle. I'm not blocking the door to their bedroom. I'm not passing legislation like in a theocracy saying, like in a Muslim country, where if you're homosexual, you should be stoned and thrown off a roof. I like living in a country where if a homosexual wants to hate God and wants to pursue that lifestyle, they should be able to, because our country is consistent with free will. So I don't have an issue with homosexuals or quote unquote transgendered people doing whatever they want to do, so long as it doesn't mess with my family and my life. See, don't try to push your lifestyle over me, and I won't try to push my lifestyle over you. Let's just agree to live our lives and let Judgment Day settle the score. I like my First Amendment. This podcast right now, because I just quoted homosexuality is an abomination, would be banned in multiple countries, and I might be getting arrested right now. But I'm able to broadcast this to you freely on SoundCloud and on YouTube and all these platforms because of the First Amendment. I don't want this right taken away from me, and I would hope that you wouldn't want my right taken away from me either. Or else, if I go down, you'll go down, because eventually these tyrants will do something that you don't agree with. Because if you disagree with me and you cheer for this, eventually that tyranny may be turned back on you. So before we go down that road, can we just agree to live in a free society? Can we just agree that we all have a First Amendment, a right to free speech, that we all have a right to worship or not to worship as we so choose, and that there is no government that can tell us what we can and cannot do? But apparently that's not what the Obama administration, and that's not what the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and Peaceful Coexistence believes. I love these names. Civil rights and peaceful coexistence. Isn't it? It's so flowery. Anytime you have to name your organization so flowery, it's almost like look out. You know, it's like if a business was called, you know, it's like you're like a plumber, and the John's really cheap and really professional and super integrous and honest plumbing of Colorado Springs. It'd be like, really? Next? Like, I don't think I need to like name myself that. But anyways, this is where we're at. You know, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and Peaceful Coexistence is writing a paper reconciling non-discrimination principles with civil liberties, and and everything's super like pseudo-intellectual. They got all these like Yale guys and Harvard guys and all these lawyers who are like so smart and so much better than us, and they say things like overly broad religious exemptions unduly, nobody uses the word unduly at a bar, unduly burdens non-discrimination laws and practices, unduly burdens, I mean, this is like legalese, but again, legalese is also code, so, and then of course the corporate media will spin it as, this is some noble civil rights thing that Obama's doing, and, we're gonna, have rainbow parades, and we're gonna light up our houses in different colors for this when this passes, and as America just spirals down the toilet. But that's it. That's all I got for today. Today's September 16th, 2016. This was Counterculture. I'm your host, Aaron Lujan. Remember, aaronlujan.com. The videos, the podcasts are there. Please spread the word. Media trust is at an all-time low. In a free market, people are looking for an alternative. The alternative is here at Counterculture. Spread the word. It's in its infancy. If you're listening to this broadcast, you are like a founder. Please like the Facebook page. Please follow it on SoundCloud. I need your guys' support. I don't believe there's anything out there in the podcast platforms that is doing what we're doing here at Counterculture. we live very busy lives. We don't have time to read the news. If you can get the podcast in under, well, today was a long one, 55 minutes. You can get it here. You don't have to read through the news. I'm doing the work for you. I'm serving you by reading all the news in the morning, cherry picking the most important news, and it's unfiltered and it's unspun. I just want to give it to you raw. Just taste good, taste bad, bad news, good news. Let you guys decide, but you're not going to find a lot of the news elsewhere. You're going to find it here. I do all the hard work for you. All you got to do is press play and press share. Thank you for your support. Thank you for joining me. Take care.